November 2nd, 1944, 3:47 in the morning. Kall Trail, Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Grid reference 953,412. Private First Class Anthony Grasso crouches behind a shattered fir tree, his M1 Garand pressed against his chest, breath visible in the freezing air. The temperature reads 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Visibility, approximately 15 feet. Somewhere ahead, in the impenetrable blackness between the trees, something is moving. It is not moving like a man moves. Grasso has been in combat for 67 days. He has seen German infantry advance across open ground at Normandy. He has watched Wehrmacht soldiers retreat through hedgerow country. He knows the sound of boots on frozen earth, the rhythm of a patrol trying to stay quiet, the distinctive silhouette of a coal scuttle helmet against the grey European sky. What he hears now is none of those things. The sound reaches him in intervals, a wet dragging, a pause, then movement again, lateral, circling, repositioning to his left flank. But when he strains his eyes toward the source, his flashlight beam finds only trees, endless trees, fir trunks so densely packed that armored vehicles cannot pass between them. Branches so thick overhead that artillery observers cannot see the forest floor from the air. Grasso is one of 120,000 American soldiers who will enter the Hürtgen Forest between September 1944 and February 1945. He is one of 33,000 who will become casualties, killed, wounded, captured, or missing. He is one of thousands who will report seeing things between those trees that did not appear in any intelligence briefing, any reconnaissance photograph, any official account of the battle. The U.S. Army called the Hürtgen Forest the most costly American engagement of the entire war measured by territory gained per casualty. The soldiers who survived called it something else entirely. They called it the Death Factory, and some of them reported that the factory had workers they could not explain. Section 1. The forest that should not have mattered to understand what American soldiers encountered in the Hürtgen. You must first understand why they were there at all, and why German High Command considered the forest strategically negligible until the Americans made it strategically catastrophic. The Hürtgenwald, as Germans called it, spans approximately 50 square miles of dense coniferous forest along the Belgian-German border, roughly 20 miles southeast of Aachen. The terrain rises between 1,000 and 2,000 feet above sea level, cut by deep ravines, narrow firebreaks, and logging trails too narrow for wheeled vehicles. The trees themselves posed the primary tactical problem. Fir and spruce, planted in tight rows for commercial logging, created a canopy so dense that sunlight rarely reached the forest floor. Undergrowth was minimal, but so was visibility. A soldier could walk within 10 feet of an enemy position and never see it. German military planners had studied this forest since 1938. Their assessment was unambiguous. The Hürtgen offered no strategic value worth the cost of defending it. A 1943 Wehrmacht analysis classified the forest as impassable for large-scale armored operations and unsuitable for sustained infantry engagement due to logistical constraints. The Siegfried Line, Germany's primary defensive fortification, ran just east of the forest. The logical Allied approach would bypass the Hürtgen entirely, striking directly at the industrial Ruhr Valley through more favorable terrain to the north. The Germans expected this. They prepared for this. What they did not expect was Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges commanding the U.S. First Army made a decision in September 1944 that military historians still debate. Rather than bypass the Hürtgen, he ordered American forces directly into it. His reasoning: the forest threatened his southern flank. German forces sheltering there could strike at any American advance on the Roa River dams to the east. The decision transformed 50 square miles of commercially planted timber into the most concentrated killing ground of the Western European campaign. and it forced German forces to occupy a forest they had never intended to defend, a forest whose depths even they had not fully explored. Section 2. The first warnings. The 9th Infantry Division entered the Hürtgen Forest on September 19, 1944. Their objective: advance 6 miles through the forest to the town of Schmidt, secure the Roa River crossings, and hold position for the broader Allied offensive. Expected timeline: 5 days. Actual timeline: 5 months, 3 divisions, and 33,000 casualties later, the objectives remained incompletely achieved. The first indication that something was wrong, beyond the expected tactical difficulties, came within 72 hours of initial deployment. On September 21, 1944, a patrol from Company K, 39th Infantry Regiment, failed to return from a reconnaissance mission along the Weissaway Creek Valley. Standard procedure in the Hürtgen meant search parties deployed at first light. What they found did not match standard combat losses. The patrol had consisted of 8 men. 6 bodies were recovered within a 40-meter radius. The remaining 2 men were never found, not during the battle, not during post-war recovery operations, not to this day. The recovered bodies presented the first anomaly. All 6 men had died from fragmentation wounds consistent with German artillery, specifically the 81 mortar rounds that would saturate American positions throughout the campaign. Tree bursts, the soldiers called them. German mortar crews had learned to fuse their shells for airburst detonation, causing the rounds to explode upon contact with tree branches 30 to 60 feet above the forest floor. The resulting shrapnel rained downward at angles no foxhole could protect against. This was documented. This was expected. This killed thousands of American soldiers over the following months. But the bodies recovered on September 21st showed evidence of something else. The after-action report, filed by Captain Edward Reynolds, Company K, 39th Infantry Regiment, noted post-mortem repositioning inconsistent with manner of death. The bodies had been moved after death. Arranged in a rough line, all facing the same direction, deeper into the forest, toward the German lines. Military police investigators attributed this to German soldiers, specifically to a known Wehrmacht practice of booby-trapping American dead to kill recovery teams. This explanation was officially accepted, but the German positions nearest to the recovery site were 800 meters distant. German patrol activity in that sector during the relevant time frame was documented as 0, and the bodies showed no evidence of booby-trapping. Captain Reynolds added a handwritten addendum to his report, later removed from the official file but preserved in his personal papers, donated to the National Archives in 1987, spoke with S/SGT. Brennan regarding recovery, he states the bodies were arranged like they were lined up to see something. When asked what, Brennan said he didn't know and didn't want to know. He has requested transfer out of the line. Staff Sergeant Michael Brennan's transfer was approved 3 days later on medical grounds. His file cites combat fatigue severe. He never returned to frontline duty and refused all interviews about his Hürtgen service until his death in 1994. Section 3. The sound between the TREES. What happened to Company K's patrol established a pattern that would repeat throughout the 5-month battle. Men would enter the forest and fail to return. Search parties would find some bodies, never all. The bodies would show wounds consistent with documented German tactics, but would present secondary details that defied explanation. By October 1944, a phenomenon had emerged among forward units so consistent that it warranted its own designation in intelligence reports: acoustic anomalies. The Hürtgen Forest generated sounds. This was, to some extent, expected. Dense forest environments amplify and distort noise. Artillery concussions echo unpredictably. Wind through tightly packed conifers creates sustained tonal sounds that can disorient soldiers unfamiliar with woodland environments. But the sounds reported by American patrols in the Hürtgen went beyond acoustic distortion. On October 16, 1944, a patrol from the 28th Infantry Division's 112th Regiment reported movement on their right flank while advancing along the Kall Trail. The patrol consisted of 12 men under the command of Sergeant First Class Albert Monaghan. Their mission: establish an observation post overlooking German positions near the town of Vossenack. At approximately 14:30 hours, the patrol halted. Private Frank de Sicco, point man, signaled enemy contact. The patrol took cover and awaited visual confirmation. None came. For 17 minutes, according to Monaghan's report, the patrol remained motionless while sounds of movement circled their position. The sounds are described in the report as footsteps, intermittent, inconsistent with known German patrol doctrine. German soldiers moved in predictable patterns: stop, listen, move. The sounds circling Monaghan's patrol moved fluidly, without pauses, in patterns that gradually tightened around the American position. At 14:47 hours, the sounds stopped. Monaghan ordered the patrol to withdraw along their entry route. They had advanced 300 meters into the forest. The return journey to their starting position required 22 minutes, 7 minutes longer than the approach, despite moving at double time. 2 men reported seeing movement as they withdrew. Private de Sicco described a shape between the trees, upright, too tall. Private Second Class Howard Langan said he saw something low, moving fast, parallel to our line of march. When asked to estimate the distance of these observations, both men gave the same answer: approximately 30 feet. At 30 feet in the Hürtgen Forest, visual identification of a human figure should have been possible, even in low-light conditions. Neither man could describe what he had seen beyond basic parameters. Neither man could confirm if what he had seen was human. Monaghan's report concludes: patrol withdrew without engagement, no contact with enemy forces. Recommend investigation of reported movement by higher authority. No investigation was conducted. The 28th Infantry Division had more pressing concerns. They were losing 50 to 100 men per day to German artillery, mines, and infantry assaults. But reports like Monaghan's continued to accumulate. By mid-November 1944, the G2 Intelligence Section of 1st Army Headquarters had received 47 separate reports of unexplained movement or sounds from units operating in the Hürtgen. No official analysis of these reports was ever completed. Section 4, the Kall Trail Massacre, November 2nd through November 7th, 1944. The Battle of Schmidt. The single most catastrophic American engagement of the Hürtgen campaign. The 28th Infantry Division, already depleted by weeks of fighting, was ordered to capture the village of Schmidt, overlooking the Roa River dam system. The attack would proceed along the Kall Trail, a narrow logging path descending into a 300-foot ravine before climbing to the German-held ridgeline beyond. The divisional commander, Major General Norman Cotter, expressed reservations. The trail was too narrow for vehicles. The ravine was overlooked by German positions on 3 sides. Withdrawal under fire would be nearly impossible. His objections were noted. The attack was ordered to proceed. On November 2nd, 2 regiments of the 28th Division advanced. Initial progress was deceptively swift. By November 3rd, elements of the 112th Infantry Regiment had entered Schmidt itself. For approximately 8 hours, American forces held the objective. Then the German counterattack began. German armor and infantry struck the American positions with overwhelming force. The 2 American regiments, strung out along 4 miles of narrow trail, could not reinforce each other. Supply vehicles could not navigate the Kall Trail. Artillery support could not penetrate the forest canopy to observe fire. Within 72 hours, the 28th Infantry Division ceased to exist as a combat-effective unit. Of the approximately 6,000 men committed to the Schmidt attack, over 6,100 became casualties, a number exceeding 100% of the attacking force because replacements fed into the battle were themselves destroyed. The Kall Trail became impassable in both directions. American wounded lay in the ravine for days, unable to be evacuated. German patrols hunted survivors. Temperatures dropped below freezing. And the reports began. Corporal James Whittaker, 110th Infantry Regiment, was wounded on November 4th and spent 3 days in the Kall Ravine before evacuation. His debriefing, conducted at an aid station on November 8th, was never included in official divisional records, but survives in medical corps documentation. There were things moving in the trees at night. We could hear them, German patrols, we thought, but they never attacked, they just moved around us. On the second night, they came closer. I could hear them breathing, heavy breathing like an animal. One of the other wounded men, I don't know his name, he died that night. He said he saw one of them standing over him. He said it wasn't wearing a uniform. Corporal Whittaker was evacuated with frostbite and shrapnel wounds. He was also diagnosed with acute combat exhaustion and removed from frontline service. His account was one of over 30 similar statements collected from Kall Trail survivors. Staff Sergeant Leonard Cowan, 112th Infantry Regiment, provided his debriefing on November 12, 1944. We were cut off for 2 days. No food, no water, no ammunition. The Germans had us surrounded. We could hear their vehicles on the ridge, but at night they stopped firing. Everyone stopped firing, and that's when we heard the other things moving through the ravine. Not Germans, Germans would have killed us. These things just moved past us, like they were looking for something. One of my men, Private Hendricks, he broke. Started screaming that something was touching him. We couldn't see anything, but we could hear it right next to us. Private William Hendricks was listed as killed in action November 5, 1944. His body was not recovered until December 1944. When found, his remains were located 450 meters from the last known position of his unit, deeper into German-held territory than any American patrol had penetrated during the battle. No explanation for the location of his body was ever provided. Section 5. The German perspective. The American reports from the Hürtgen Forest are extensive but fragmentary. Combat conditions precluded systematic documentation. Most accounts were recorded in debriefings days or weeks after the events described, filtered through military psychiatry's tendency to attribute all unusual observations to combat stress. But the Americans were not alone in the forest. German forces occupied the Hürtgen from September 1944 through February 1945. Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS units rotated through defensive positions throughout the campaign. Their records, captured after the war and archived in German federal repositories, tell a parallel story. Hauptmann Werner Klest commanded a company of the 275th Infantry Division during the November fighting. His unit held positions near the village of Hürtgen itself, overlooking American approach routes. His official reports are standard military documentation: unit strengths, ammunition expenditure, enemy contact. His diary, preserved by his family and donated to the Bundesarchiv in 1998, contains different material. Entry dated November 6, 1944. The Americans have stopped attacking for the moment. Our positions hold, but the men are disturbed. Feldwebel Brandt reports that listening posts have detected movement in the forest at night, movement that does not correspond to American patrol activity. I inspected the positions myself last evening. I heard nothing, but the men are certain. They say something is moving between the trees. Something that avoids both German and American lines. Entry dated November 9, 1944. 3 men from 2nd Platoon failed to return from a reconnaissance patrol last night. We found 2 of them this morning, 200 meters from our wire, both dead, wounds inconsistent with American small arms fire, deep lacerations to the throat and chest. The 3rd man, Jeffrater Hoffman, remains missing. His weapon was found 50 meters from the bodies, unfired, the safety still engaged. Entry dated November 14, 1944. I have submitted a report to Battalion regarding the patrol losses and the unusual circumstances. Battalion's response was dismissive. They suggest American infiltration teams using knives and garrotes. This is possible. But it does not explain what Unteroffizier Schäfer claims to have seen. Kleist's diary does not specify what Unteroffizier Schäfer reported seeing. But a separate document, an interrogation transcript from May 1945, provides possible context. Schäfer was captured by American forces during the final German collapse in the Rhineland. His interrogation was routine, focused on order of battle information for German units in the Hürtgen sector. But the interrogating officer, Captain Morris Seligman, appended a handwritten note to the transcript. Subject became agitated when discussing November 1944 operations in the Hürtgenwald. Stated that his unit had lost men to something that wasn't American. When pressed, subject described tall figures moving through the trees at night, very fast. Impossible to see clearly. Subject insists these figures were not Americans, not partisans, not German deserters. When asked what they were, subject stated he did not know and did not want to speculate. Subject's emotional state deteriorated rapidly, interrogation terminated. Schäfer was processed as a standard prisoner of war and repatriated to Germany in 1947. He never spoke publicly about his Hürtgen service. He died in 1983. Section 6. The tree burst theory. Military historians have proposed numerous explanations for the psychological disturbances reported by Hürtgen veterans. The most commonly cited is the tree burst phenomenon and its cascading effects on soldier mental health. The physics of the tree burst were devastating. When German mortar and artillery rounds struck the upper canopy of the Hürtgen Forest, they detonated 30 to 60 feet above ground level. The resulting shrapnel sprayed downward and outward in patterns that conventional foxholes could not deflect. A soldier lying prone in a properly constructed fighting position could still be killed by fragments entering from directly above. The psychological effect compounded the physical danger. In open terrain, soldiers could hear incoming fire and estimate its trajectory. In the Hürtgen, the dense canopy muffled directional sound. Rounds that would miss by 50 meters in open terrain could still kill through the unpredictable spray of tree bursts. There was no safe position. There was no warning. Death arrived from above at random intervals throughout the day and night. The medical term was combat exhaustion. The soldiers called it going tree happy. Symptoms included hallucinations, paranoid ideation, auditory disturbances, and dissociative episodes. Men reported seeing Germans where no Germans existed. They reported hearing voices, footsteps, breathing. They froze in position for hours, unable to move. They broke and ran, abandoning their units, their weapons, their identities as soldiers. If you want to understand the full scope of what American soldiers reported in the Hürtgen Forest, and whether official explanations account for all of it, subscribe now so you don't miss the investigation's conclusion. The tree burst theory explains much. It explains why so many soldiers reported auditory and visual anomalies. It explains why psychological casualties in the Hürtgen exceeded those of any other Western Front engagement. It explains why men with exemplary combat records in Normandy and beyond suddenly disintegrated in the forest, but it does not explain everything. Section 7. The bodies that were never found. The U.S. Army Grave Registration Service began recovery operations in the Hürtgen Forest in March 1945, immediately following the German retreat. Their task: locate, identify, and recover the remains of American soldiers killed during the 5-month battle. The scale of the operation was immense. The Hürtgen fighting had produced an estimated 8,000 American dead. An unknown number of these had been buried by their units in hasty field grave. Others lay where they had fallen, unrecovered due to ongoing combat. Still others had been buried by German forces, captured, or destroyed beyond identification by artillery fire. By August 1945, grave registration teams had recovered approximately 6,500 remains from the Hürtgen sector. Of these, over 1,100 could not be identified due to the condition of the remains or the absence of identification tags. Approximately 1,500 American soldiers who died in the Hürtgen Forest were never recovered. This number is not unusual for intensive combat operations. The Normandy campaign, by comparison, produced similar percentages of unrecovered dead. The nature of modern warfare, artillery, explosives, burial under debris, meant that some remains would never be found. But the Hürtgen recoveries produced anomalies that grave registration officers documented without explanation. In July 1945, a recovery team under the command of First Lieutenant Harold Stone entered a previously unsearched sector of the forest near the Kall Trail. The sector had been the site of heavy fighting in November 1944. Unit records indicated at least 40 American casualties in the immediate area. Stone's team worked the sector for 11 days. They recovered 23 sets of remains. Of these 23, 18 were located in positions consistent with combat death in foxholes along patrol routes near aid stations. Their wounds were consistent with documented German weapons. 5 were not. Stone's recovery report, filed August 3, 1945, documents the anomalies. Remains designated HTGN 1187 through HTGN 1191 were located in a cluster approximately 400 meters northeast of grid reference 947,418. The cluster was not proximate to any documented American or German position. No cartridge casings, equipment, or other evidence of combat activity was found in the immediate area. The remains showed no evidence of gunshot or fragmentation wounds. Cause of death could not be determined. The remains were positioned in a rough circle, all facing inward toward a central point. At the central point, a shallow excavation approximately 18 inches deep and 3 feet in diameter was noted. The excavation was empty. Stone's report continues, identification of the remains has not been possible. No identification tags were recovered. Uniform fragments were present, but rank and unit insignia had been removed or destroyed. Dental records have been requested for all unidentified personnel reported killed or missing in the Kall Trail sector during November 1944. Dental record comparison was conducted in September 1945. None of the 5 remains matched any reported American casualty. The 5 soldiers, if they were soldiers, have never been identified. Their remains were interred at the Henry Chapelle American Cemetery in Belgium under designations HTGN 1187 through HTGN 1191. Marked unknown, First Lieutenant Stone submitted a request for additional investigation into the circumstances of the recovery. The request was denied. His unit was reassigned to recovery operations in the Rhineland. Stone served in the Army until 1956. In a 1978 interview with a graduate student researching grave registration operations, he was asked about the Hürtgen recoveries. "I supervised over 400 recoveries in that forest," he said. I saw things that combat does to the human body that would give you nightmares for the rest of your life. But I understood those things: artillery, mortars, exposure. I understood the war. What I found in that clearing, those 5 men, or whatever they were, arranged in a circle around a hole in the ground, I never understood that. And nobody wanted me to. Section 8. The photograph in 1952, a Belgian forestry official named Marcel Dubois was conducting a routine survey of timber stands in the Hürtgen Forest. The forest had been replanted after the war in some sectors. In others, the original growth remained, now reclaiming the shell craters and bunker complexes left by the fighting. Dubois carried a camera to document forest health and regrowth patterns. Over 4 days in April 1952, he exposed approximately 60 photographs of the Hürtgenwald survey area. When the photographs were developed, one image stood out. Frame 47 of Dubois' survey roll depicts a section of mature fir trees approximately 200 meters north of the former Kall Trail. The photograph was taken at approximately 16:15 hours local time, based on shadow angles. The image quality is consistent with the era's equipment, a medium-format camera with black and white film. In the left third of the frame, between 2 fir trunks, a figure is visible. Dubois did not observe this figure when he took the photograph. He was alone during the survey. He did not hear movement or have any indication of another person in the area. The figure stands approximately 15 meters from the camera position. It is upright. It appears to be approximately 7 feet tall, significantly taller than the average human male of the era. The figure is dark, suggesting either dark clothing or shadow, but the photograph's shadows fall in the opposite direction. The figure has no discernible facial features. Its outline suggests arms held close to the body. Its posture is slightly forward-leaning, as if observing the camera. Dubois showed the photograph to his supervisor. His supervisor suggested it was a tree stump or shadow artifact. Dubois did not agree, but had no alternative explanation to offer. The photograph remained in Belgian forestry archives until 1989, when a researcher studying war damage recovery in the Ardennes region found it during an unrelated document search. The researcher, a professor at the University of Liège named Pierre Vandermeer, published a brief article in a regional historical journal noting the unusual figure visible in the image. Vandermeer received 3 letters in response to his article. 2 were from American veterans of the Hürtgen campaign. The first, from a former private in the 4th Infantry Division, stated simply, "I saw the same thing in November 1944. No one believed me." The second, from a former sergeant in the 8th Infantry Division, was more detailed. "I served in the Hürtgen from November to December 1944. I was wounded on December 13th and evacuated. Before I was hit, I saw things in that forest that I have never told anyone about. Not my wife, not my children, not the VA doctors who asked about my nightmares. Tall figures, very dark, that moved between the trees at night, never during daylight, always at the edge of vision. I thought I was losing my mind. Everyone thought they were losing their minds. We blamed the tree bursts, the shelling, the cold, the fear. But I know what I saw. The photograph in your article, that is what I saw. I am 67 years old. I have waited 45 years for someone else to see it too." Vandermeer attempted to contact both veterans for follow-up interviews. Neither responded to his letters. The first veteran died in 1991. The second could not be located. The photograph remains in the University of Liège archives. Modern image analysis has been inconclusive. The figure is not a double exposure. It is not a known photographic artifact. It is not easily explained as a natural feature. It also cannot be confirmed as anything beyond an unusual shadow formation in a photograph taken 8 years after the battle ended. Section 9. The complete record between September 19, 1944 and February 10, 1945, the Battle of the Hürtgen Forest produced the following documented outcomes. American casualties. Approximately 33,000 total, including killed, wounded, captured, and missing. This figure includes replacements fed into the battle to replace initial casualties, many of whom themselves became casualties within days or hours. German casualties, approximately 28,000 total. Unlike American forces, which rotated multiple divisions through the sector, German units generally remained in position until destroyed or withdrawn. Divisions engaged. 9 American divisions saw significant combat in the Hürtgen. The 1st, 4th, 8th, 9th, 28th, 78th, 83rd, and 104th Infantry Divisions, plus the 5th Armored Division. Multiple divisions were rendered combat ineffective and required reconstitution. Territory gained, approximately 50 square miles of forest at a cost of roughly 660 casualties per square mile. Strategic outcome. The Roa River dams, ostensibly the objective of the offensive, were not secured until February 1945. German engineers opened the dam gates before American capture, flooding the Roa Valley and delaying the Allied Rhine crossing by 2 weeks. Documented reports of unusual phenomena. The following statistics are drawn from after-action reports, debriefing transcripts, and medical records archived at the National Archives, the U.S. Army Military History Institute, and Divisional Historical Collections. Formal reports citing unexplained movement or sounds in the combat zone. 47 medical evacuations citing combat fatigue with hallucinatory features. 1,247 bodies recovered in positions inconsistent with combat death. At least 23, based on Grave registration documentation, personnel reported killed in action whose remains were never recovered. Approximately 1,500 personnel reported missing in action, never reclassified. 68 as of 2023, the 68 soldiers still officially classified as missing in action from the Hürtgen Forest represent one of the highest concentrations of unresolved MIA cases from any Western front. Engagement. Recovery operations continued sporadically through the 1990s. Remains are occasionally found to this day. In 2019, a German hiking group discovered human remains approximately 2 kilometers from the former Kall Trail. The remains were determined to be American based on dental work and uniform fragments. Identification through DNA comparison is ongoing. The position of the remains in dense forest, far from any documented American advance, has not been explained. Section 10. The forest today. The Hürtgen Forest remains the largest contiguous forest in Western Germany. Approximately 35,000 hectares of fir, spruce, and beech cover the same terrain where 60,000 men became casualties in 5 months of fighting. The forest has regrown. The shell craters have filled with leaves and topsoil. The bunkers have collapsed or been reclaimed by vegetation. The logging trails have been widened, paved, or abandoned. But the forest has not forgotten. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of the battle, a group of American veterans returned to the Hürtgen for a memorial ceremony. 23 men, average age 72, walked the Kall Trail for the first time since 1944. Their accounts were recorded by a documentary film crew and later archived at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. One veteran, a former rifleman with the 28th Infantry Division, stopped walking approximately 400 meters into the forest. He refused to continue. When asked why, he pointed to a section of trees to his right. "That's where I saw it," he said. "November 1944, I was wounded, lying in a shell hole, waiting for the medics. It was almost dark. Something came out of those trees and stood over me. I thought I was dying, that it was coming for me, but it just stood there, looking at me, and then it was gone." He paused. "I came back here to prove to myself it wasn't real. But standing here, looking at those trees, I don't know anymore. I don't know what's in this forest. I don't think anyone does. The veteran's name was Anthony Grasso, the same private first class who crouched behind a shattered fir tree on November 2nd, 1944, listening to something move between the trees. He returned to the United States after the memorial ceremony. He died in 1997. In his personal effects, his family found a single photograph. It showed a section of the Hürtgen Forest taken during the 1994 visit. In the photograph, between two fir trees, there is a shadow that looks like a figure. His family did not know what to make of it. Neither did the archivists who catalogued his papers. Neither does anyone who has looked at the photograph since. November 2nd, 2024, 3:47 in the morning. Kall Trail Hürtgen Forest, Germany, 80 years to the hour since Private First Class Anthony Grasso heard something moving in the darkness. The forest stands silent. The trail is empty. The only sounds are wind through the fir branches and somewhere far away, the bark of a fox. But if you walk the Kall Trail at night, as hikers occasionally do, despite the warnings, despite the stories, you may hear something else. A wet dragging sound, a pause, movement, lateral circling. The Hürtgen Forest has not revealed what moved between its trees in the winter of 1944. Perhaps it never will. Or perhaps, after 80 years, something is still waiting to be found.